In a way, talking about honey processing, because it's a hybrid intermediate type of processing, it's a great way to talk about coffee processing in general. So let's go through the stages. Here's a photograph of coffee on the tree. You've probably seen photos of this. This one was in the Borena zone, Oromia in Ethiopia from some years ago. So you're going to harvest the coffee. This is sort of a representation of what coffee cherry looks like. This is from actually a tree that I had at home, and they're rather small beans. But what I would do is I would slice open the coffee, and here you can see how the two opposing flat-side beans face each other. And around them is a skin, and attached to the skin is some fruit, but also attached to the seeds itself is the fruit. So as I said, it's kind of like when you eat certain types of plums or nectarines and the pulp sticks to the seed. That's what you get when you are processing coffee. And what you need to do is, if you want a wet process coffee, is to remove that sticky fruit layer that's clinging to the seed. So you bring your coffee to a wet mill. If you want to do wet processed or wet process style coffee, wet mills can look all kinds of ways. And then there's going to be pulper machines, different types of machines from fairly high tech to very simple local machines. And you're going to feed your coffee cherry into the machine. And the pulper is going to be taking off just the outer skin with whatever fruit is attached to it. And what comes out on the other end is this kind of sticky seed, which is going to be the coffee seed that we're going to roast. But at this point, it's sort of slimy. And here's a short little video here. You can see it coming out. And what are you going to do now? If you want to do traditional wet process coffee, what you're going to do is you're going to take this and you're going to send it to a fermentation tank. And either dry or underwater, you're going to let that coffee sit for a prescribed amount of time until you can feel that the fruit has started to break down. That happens because of microorganisms and bacteria and yeast, which are all related, of course, and acidification. And that fruit breaks down, and then you can test it. You get a kind of a gritty feel in your hand. When it's you can feel that it started to separate. And then you're going to send it into a washing channel or a washing machine of some kind where it gets scrubbed. There's a sort of grating that goes on. Here's some video of washing channel, little loop here. You can see as it gets washed down the channel, there's a kind of abrasion to it, and they scrub it, and all that sticky fruit releases. And now it's ready to go out to the drying beds. But let's say you pulped off the skin and you said, I want to make honey coffee. Well, what you do is you take that coffee seed that still has the fruit attached to it, and you just put it out to dry on the drying beds. As you can see that coffee, this photo that I made in Costa Rica some years ago at Helsar Beneficio, and this is a coffee bean that's fresh out of the fermentation tanks, or in this case, an eco-pulper. The seed is kind of white and swollen, and it fully occupies this parchment vacuum layer. And as you dry it, this is what happens. As you can see, it's starting to dry down in this photo. And this is one I took at home. This is fully dried, and it's separated because the green bean has shrunk. So parchment, when we talk about parchment coffee, it's because this outer layer is kind of paper-like. It feels like old, thick parchment paper. Let's see. Here is a photograph in Rwanda that I took of wet process parchment after it's been through fermentation. Now, here's a photo I took in India, actually, of a pulped honey coffee, or called pulp natural in Brazil. And you can see the yellow color to it. So compare these. Here's a wet process coffee from Ethiopia. Now look here at the honey coffee as it comes out to the beds. You can see the yellow color. That's because this fruit has dried on the parchment. You have different levels and different types of honey coffee depending on how much fruit you've chosen to leave on. Some of your machines will actually let you sort of dial in by the amount of water and pressure you use, how much fruit you leave on. So this photo shows a very fruity coffee. This is actually in Flores, Tancul. And this would be called sort of like dark red honey, black honey is the sort of marketing name some people use. Here's some various photos. This is in Kerinci, Barroca Co-op. You can see them drying different types of honey coffee. You can see subtly different colors to the lots on these drying beds. And sometimes people dry honey coffee on patios or on tarps. This one is in Costa Rica. And here's a great photo because it's showing you the wet processed coffee on your left and the honey coffee on your right. And that can be a little confusing because in this photo, actually, what we're looking at is high-grade parchment on the right, the whitish parchment of wet processed coffee, and low-grade parchment, which is sort of discolored and looks like honey coffee. And this is another nice photo to show the different options. This is at that Kerinci Barroca Co-op again in Sumatra when I visited there last time. And here you have the wet process white parchment on the left. In the center you have natural coffee, full pods. So that's you're taking the whole dried cherry or laying it out to dry, and you see this dark color because it's still inside the dried fruit. And then the red honey coffee there. And we'll talk a little bit about the difference in roasting. What do these different processes look like roasted? In this photo you have wet processed coffee on your right. In the center you have honey coffee, and then you have natural coffee. They look quite different. Let's discuss that.